talk to, dear, is you. Darling, I got a mailbox full of letters I don't answer, reminding me what I forgot to do. I'm not too good with names and addresses, darling, but I'll just bet there's no forgetting you.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Where'd the old town go? They moved it on north of here in the shopping mall.
Good morning and welcome to Old Town Cleveland here on WOOP FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.woopfm.com. You can call us here at 614-5553. We also have an iPhone app. Good morning, Deb, my lovely co-host. Debbie, tell us about this program.
Good morning. We're going to have a great show today, especially for all of our folks that love the Civil War around this area or love to listen to people talk about it. We have Larry Stevens, an author, in today that's going to be talking about Gatewood, one of the big, well-known bushwhackers during the Civil War, and he was in this area, and we're going to talk about where he came from and maybe even about where we think he went. And we also have, we jokingly say, our only friend that can read with us this morning, Jim Hodson. He is quite an avid reader and a historian himself, and he always comes in when we have an author on and helps us talk about things. And we're just so glad to have everybody with us. This has been a very historic week here in Bradley County as far as history is concerned, and we have to say that we've seen some dreams come true this week. Some fellows over at the Sons of the American Revolution had a dream a few years ago that we would have a statue of Benjamin Cleveland, and we did unveil him yesterday in the pouring rain. Had a great participation, although it was kind of crowded when we had to go over to the Museum Center, but thankfully the Museum Center was able to open up the lobby and let us in there. Also, tomorrow, another dream coming true up in Charleston. About 4 or 5 years ago, some ladies up in Charleston helped start the Historical Society, and their dream from day one was to have a welcome center up there. And that dream's going to come true tomorrow. They're going to open it up to the public at 3 o'clock. And by chance, I'm going to be the guest speaker, so I hope everybody comes out to see us. It's in the old bank building across from the Charleston High School football field, the old Charleston High School football field. And I hope that everybody will come out and support them and congratulate them on a job well done. Heritage Center, I believe they're calling it, Ron.
And the new statue of Colonel Benjamin Cleveland is a brass statue.
Bronze or brass?
Brass.
Okay.
And it was done by a local man of all time. They searched all over America to find a artist to do that, and we found one here in Cleveland. So
Which I really liked that it was a local artist, and his name's Josh Coleman. Young man.
Yes.
Very humble. When I talked with him yesterday, I found him to be very humble, but very, very talented. And I think that when you see the statue, you'll appreciate that. Ron, tell us where the statue's at.
It's in the First Street Park. It's the new park down, if you pass the police station and go through the stop sign, it's right there on the right, and the statue's there in the grassy area. So go by and look
I
at it.
understand 3 or 4 different local people did the posing for Benjamin Cleveland, and then to get the face correct, since we didn't have photographs of him at that time, they took photographs of people that are known to be related to him and kind of did a merging of the characteristics of the face, and he's quite the handsome gentleman.
He was.
They didn't quite make him life-size, Jim.
He was. His name was
Really?
Roundabout.
Pretty big guy.
When he fought at Kings Mountain, he weighed 350 pounds, and when he died, he was a little bit bigger.
And his horse got shot out from under him at Kings Mountain. It probably said, "Thank you very much."
mercy killing.
Mercy killing. And then and we understand. I don't think that was kind of the story of his life, but I think by the time he passed, as an older gentleman, he was having to have custom-made furniture made and stuff as that. And they called him Old Roundabout.
Yeah, a few things coming up tonight at the B&B Marina tonight. There's the Convertibles will be playing at, let me see what time here.
Saturday,
8 o'clock.
the 20th at 8 o'clock at
Right.
B&B Marina.
Yes, and what else is going on, Deb?
Well, we've got some friends having a yard sale across from the U.S. Money Shop over close to the Boys Club. I believe they're in the Pullins used car lot there. Hope you guys will go over and visit with them. And also our friend Jesse has lost his keys, and he thinks he either lost them on Willow Street or at the post office there on Key Street. So if someone found a set of keys, if you'll call me, I'll give you Jesse's number. We want to make sure that you sign up for the 3rd annual golf tournament, the Dustin Lefford Live Wide Open Scholarship. You can contact this number, 715-3157, to sign up for the Dustin Lefford Scholarship Foundation. His dad, Danny Letford, was on here a few weeks ago. I got a couple more things.
You're
Our
busy
first
today.
our first cruise-in's coming up next Saturday, April the 27th, from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. Can't wait for that. Also, next week's the activities going on down at the Museum Center. We have the Spring Art Festival, and I'm going to be there signing books. We have the Candy Creek book and a DVD available there at the Museum Center now, and Confederate Voices continues to be popular there, so I'll be glad to meet and greet and personalize those books for you. I'm going to be there Saturday from about 1 to 4, maybe 5, and then Friday night I'll be there for the opening.
Yep.
Okay, the Bradley County Farmers Market North is going to open today. And it's next to the County Recreational Complex on Urbane Road. And it runs from April 20th to November the 20th. Come out and help some of our local farmers sell their stuff. And I think, Ron, you're going to go up today and visit our friends up in Delano at the Farmers Market, aren't you?
At the Amish, or Mennonites, I think.
Well, I'm not going with you today because I'm going to the home tour, and that's going on right now. You go to the History Branch downtown, purchase your ticket, and you get to view 4 houses, including the Hardwick house that's been redone. But, Ron, you have to promise you won't bring home a rooster.
No, they do.
Sometimes they have their animal sale, and those animals look so cute and so sweet in those little cages, but I'm sure I don't need them at my house.
So you get buy a rooster, and then he'll crow in the morning.
There you go. Wake you up.
But he won't have a snooze control.
Yeah. Where's the snooze button?
Larry, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm great, Ron, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. Now, tell us where you came from.
Well, I was born and reared down in Marietta, Georgia, and within a stone's throw of Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. So I kind of grew up with the Civil War on my doorstep. So that's the short version right there.
And so this morning you come out of Rome, Georgia?
Rome, Georgia.
Floyd County.
Floyd County, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's good.
Tell everybody what you do for a living, Larry.
Well, what I do for a living is I'm a reference librarian at Georgia Highlands College there in Rome. And I've been an educator pretty much all of my life. I was a school teacher before I was a librarian. And but I've always been passionate about writing, passionate about history. And it's just a great love of mine. And so that's why I appreciate y'all inviting me to come up and talk about Mr. Gatewood.
Well, we saw Larry up in Polk County at the Historical Society meeting and invited him that very day to come be with us because we knew that our listeners would want to know that stuff. Let's go back to your library. Do you have a lot of historical documents there?
Debbie, unfortunately, we do not. I would transform it into a historic library if I could, but apparently we're a 2-year community college, and so we have a lot of books that pretty much just support the academic curriculum, just everything. We do have some history, but we really don't have a focus on the local history. That can be found at the public library there in Rome. In Rome,
okay. Well, I know that our little community college here, we had some of the best historians around teach at our community college, Mr. Lillard being one of them. And every now and then, when you find the right person, they'll let you in the back room and go through their rare collection. Mm-hmm. They have some really good stuff up there.
And they have started the digital photography library at Cleveland State.
Which is putting a lot of the historical photographs online so people can see them, along with the Tennessee Digital Library.
And, of course, Georgia has some excellent records out there. Is this your first book, Larry?
Actually, I've self-published a couple of books prior to this one, and it's interesting. About 8 years ago, I wrote a regimental history of an Alabama regiment, the 30th Alabama. And I had a bunch of ancestors in the 30th. And that book is still selling. It's amazing that people across the country are still interested in that regiment, mostly the descendants of men who fought in the regiment. But I've done a couple of smaller books. Gatewood is my first commercially published book, so I'm enormously proud of this one.
Jim, where are you from? We didn't know.
Right here in Bradley County.
Yeah, you grew up here, and you've read the book. What do you think about it?
Oh, it's a wonderful book, and I was speaking to Larry before the show about how this book, like some others, really humanizes the war, brings it down to the local level and away from the big set-piece battles that we've all studied in school and know about Gettysburg and Vicksburg and Chickamauga and so forth, but it tells us what the war was like back at home. You kind of think about some of the movies you may have seen about the Civil War, and they show there's Grandma and Grandpa and back on the farm, and the war's going on, and they're just relatively untouched by it all. But around here, that certainly wasn't the case.
We just had so much traffic come through here,
and there's so much division, partisanship on both sides, and people out for revenge or people out to thwart the other side, or one group worried about the other group tearing up the railroad, and there's just always something going on. And even in this county, when we were nominally occupied by the Confederacy, there weren't that many troops around, but the railroad was the big concern.
The bridge burning, that if they had cell phones, that bridge burning would have worked out pretty good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's I heard one historian say, people talk about how the what if scenarios about the Civil War. Everybody likes to do that, I guess, but they talk about, well, what if the South had better weapons, or what if? And one historian said, if the Confederacy had 6 walkie-talkies, they could have won the war.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
Or of course, I always say if they had a different general beside Bragg too.
Well, we always have to think too how life in America would be different without the Civil War, because even during the Civil War and shortly thereafter, we had old men, women, and children were who occupied the South at that point in time, because we lost so many young men during that horrible time.
Was it 1 out of 10 in America or something at that time?
Maybe even higher than that, I think.
And it wasn't just the South either, because the military structure of so many of these organizations was men from a small town would form a military unit, and they would all be assigned together. And you get a battle like Fredericksburg, where the units were sent in one after the other and just slaughtered wholesale. You might find that there's a small town in Ohio that doesn't have any young men anymore, because they were all in this company, and they were all killed in a certain battle.
All killed, all maimed. And I think too, I think the closest I cried many times writing Confederate Voices, because I'd run into things that just broke my heart. But there was one indication that there was this one small town that kind of thing happened to, and I can't remember the town right now, but it was I believe close to Richmond, and they said the smell in that town was just so sad because what it was the women had their wash pots out back behind their houses, and they were putting some chemicals or some kind of concoction in there that dyed their clothes black because they were widows then. And the smell of that hung thick in the air for weeks and weeks and weeks, and what a sad sign it was of what was going on in there in that village. I think that that kind of brought it home too.
Larry, tell us what a bushwhacker is.
All right.
And now, is that something you trim your hedges with and things?
That's what a weed whacker.
Well, that's probably one definition, Ron. But the main thing about the bushwhacker, and I have not really studied the origin of the term bushwhacker going all the way back into history. I'm sure it's an ancient term. But the Anglo definition of a bushwhacker is somebody who would probably lay behind some bushes in dense foliage or behind a tree and would come out and whack the person who is coming down the road or what have you. So basically it's an ambush type situation. And, of course, bushwhacking can apply not just to ambushing somebody coming down a road, but bushwhacker became synonymous with any kind of guerrilla activity on both sides, Union and Confederate. And so bushwhackers would not be beyond burning down a homestead, stealing livestock, engaging other bushwhackers. And that's something I'd like to point out, is that it wasn't just a war that bushwhackers made against civilians, but the bushwhackers spent a lot of time fighting other bushwhackers,
sure,
and occasionally the opposing Federal or Confederate cavalry forces.
Surprisingly, even after the Revolutionary War, that we still fought a lot of those battles where we lined up on either side of the field and then marched into each other.
Mm-hmm.
Although even during the Revolutionary War, we done a lot of bushwhacking type or militia or guerrilla type warfare there. And so this is basically, but the bushwhacker was not just a guerrilla warfare, which could have been done by the whole troops. These tend to be an individual or a group who split off. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they even deserted from their army and just went on their own. Is that true?
Right. Well, this is certainly true of John Gatewood, who is the subject of my book. And it seems like so many of the bushwhackers started out with the regular army, and then something tragic happened at home, which then drew them out of the army. You could say they deserted, or they were absent without leave. They went home, and they found kindred spirits who had also suffered like tragedies, and then they would form these units. And sometimes they were acknowledged by the regular army, and sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they actually operated with the army, but other times they were considered to be outlaws. So kind of outside the authority of the regular.
And there was no one here to stop them.
That's
I
right.
mean, most of the time.
That's right. All the menfolk were gone. So what you had were women and children and elderly folk on the home front who were basically, I'm not saying these people were defenseless, but a lot of them did not have the resources to withstand these gangs or to hold them off. So there was a lot of, it was a very dirty kind of war on the home front.
Would you say that anybody that had got the name bushwhacker was truly a thug, or were they, some of them still just a military unit that were very aggressive, or did they turn out to be a group of thugs?
Well, Ron, I think you can find examples where you had guerrilla units or bushwhacker units that were very honorable, that were not thugs. They had their own code. And generally the bushwhacker code was that you did not make war upon women and children. You might take something that belongs to them, but you don't physically abuse them. And then you had those bushwhackers who were definitely outlaws, definitely thugs, and who had no code of honor at all. Now,
with Gatewood, I've read a lot of places. Was he a captain or a lieutenant in the Kentucky? Was that where he was at, or?
Gatewood is kind of.
Or did he come up with his own name, own rank?
I think he promoted himself once he started out as a private with a Confederate cavalry regiment. It was Company F Major Willis Scott Bledsoe's Company F of the 4th Tennessee Cavalry. And this makes it a little confusing because there were 2 4th Tennessee Cavalry regiments. But this particular one was led by Colonel Baxter Smith. So for the first year of the war, roughly from the fall of 61 through the fall of 62, we know that Gatewood and 3 or 4 of his brothers rode with this Company F. And then right around Christmas time of 62, Gatewood kind of bolts out the door and heads home because he's gotten word that there's trouble on the home front. And at that point, he pitches in with Champ Ferguson, who folks who are familiar with the war up in Kentucky and northeast Tennessee are very familiar with Champ Ferguson. And so Gatewood rides with Ferguson, you might say, as possibly a lieutenant. And then at some point in early 64, Ferguson is wounded in a skirmish or a firefight, and Gatewood by that time has built such a following within Ferguson's band that he appoints himself as a captain. And he and about 40 or 50 men spend the last year of the war riding as an independent unit.
Yeah. And in a few minutes we'll get to it eventually, but they come through this area very close through Polk County where they killed 16, 17 people, right. And we'll talk about that a little later. Jim, what's your definition of bushwhacker? Or does that you have anything to it or?
No, I think that pretty well summed it up. This area southeast Tennessee saw several of these folks. A lot of people know about the Kirkland bushwhackers from up in the Tellico,
right.
North Carolina border.
And he comes from Polk County also.
Details on him, Jim? What kind of things did they do?
Same type things. Waylaid, passing, other made war on other bushwhacker groups. They went through raiding, trying to find supplies and money, but they. Probably as much as Gatewood or even more than Gatewood, they really just became outlaws there toward the end, and they would just bushwhack anybody who happened to come along. And there's a lot of tales told around Tellico, around the North Carolina border region about people that they waylaid and murdered, and just strictly as outlaws.
He was a 3rd Lieutenant John Jackson Kirtland of Company B, 3rd Regiment Tennessee Infantry, is what it said. Now, did he stay with them? He was around Cherokee County up in that area, and he killed quite a few people around and up in the Polk County area too. And he had been captured in Vicksburg and paroled out of there. So then he come back and made him mad.
Well, a lot of times some of the folks that they killed off would be soldiers that had come home for short periods of time to try to plow.
Yeah.
I mean, we had people around here men dressed in women's clothes out. There were some ugly women out plowing fields. It's beards and all, you know.
You're listening to Whoop FM Old Town Cleveland. You can call us here at 614-5553. Got Larry Stevens and our friend Jim Hodson in here this morning. We're talking about bushwhackers, and particularly we're going to talk about John P. Gatewood, who was a very legendary Gatewood. Bushwhacker. Who do you think's the most famous bushwhacker in the war?
Well, I think Jesse James would have to be kind of in a class by himself out in Missouri.
Yeah.
I think Jesse James actually came through here, or you know how those legends go.
He was in Nashville for a while.
Yeah.
He was in Nashville. As a matter of fact, there's a picture of him
Gallatin or something
working in a barrel factory. There's actually a picture of him outside there. Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson. That's a different.
That's a
different story completely. Jesse James. Of course, most people think of him as being a bank robber, but really he did that. But he was part of. Someone will call me the United Order, Golden Order, or Golden Knights, or something.
The Golden Circle.
Yeah, something like that. Basically, if you look at the banks that he robbed, they were Republican Northern-owned banks.
Mm-hmm.
And
one of the banks, I don't remember if it was the Northfield, Minnesota Bank, or one of those was actually owned by Benjamin Butler, the Yankee general.
Mm-hmm.
Owned one of those banks, and that was one reason he wanted to rob that particular.
Well, and then of course
bank.
He robbed a lot of the trains too, sort of the I think owned by Northern Yankees. So, but if you go back in history, he wasn't just a cowboy bank robber. He was actually part of a bigger thing, and they hid gold along the trails. I know Jim and I think
I call him a domestic terrorist these days.
Domestic terrorist, right? Yeah, and things. So, but Gatewood, of course, very, very interesting. And tell us where he's from, Larry, and Why do you think he became a bushwhacker? I've
Okay.
read it, but I'll let you do that.
Okay. Well, Gatewood was born and raised in Fentress County, Tennessee. And folks that are familiar with Fentress County know it's also the home county of Alvin York, Sergeant Alvin York of World War I fame, one of our greatest American heroes. But kind of a long story short here, Gatewood grew up in the Wolf River Valley, which was a very fertile pocket of rich farmland. And if you go to Fentress County today, you can still see the valley where the three streams come together to form the Wolf River. And it was one of the few really fertile pockets of good ground in that county. So most of the county is very mountainous, very poor. The Gatewoods grew a lot of tobacco, a lot of wheat. They didn't grow cotton. It was a little bit too far north for that kind of crop. And at one time they were slave owners, but then they sold off all their slaves, and they used the money to purchase more land. And they would have folks from the mountains kind of on the edge of their property come down into the valley at harvest time, Ron, and help them just harvest the crop. So they became enormously wealthy in a very short period of time, and just prior to the war, they made the decision to pitch in with the Confederacy. What's interesting is that so many of their neighbors who had helped them at harvest time decided to try to remain neutral or pitched in with the Union. And so that's kind of the beginning of Gatewood's odyssey through the Civil War. And then he, as I said earlier, he rode with the Confederate cavalry for at least a year and served honorably. And then word arrived from home right around December of '62 that something very bad had happened on the home front. And so he went and he found out that his mother and one of his sisters had been brutally murdered. And at that point he had some kind of a change of heart and decided not to return to the regular army, and he decided he would then avenge them by, pitching in with these bushwhackers under Champ Ferguson. So from that point on, he was pretty much a loyal Confederate. He just pretty much operated by his own rules. And then toward the end of the war, as Jim was saying earlier, he kind of branched out into his own. He just kind of followed his own path near the very end of the war. So,
now, what was his? Did they think his sister had been raped and all that, and the murdered? So it was just not as simple as just being
It was
murdered.
a
Right.
ugly crime.
Right. It was a very brutal crime. We don't know who the perpetrators were. We feel that it was probably a pro-Union bushwhacker group, or it could have been regular federal cavalry passing through the area. But in all likelihood, it was probably a pro-Union bushwhacker group. There was a group up there led by a fellow named Tinker Dave Beatty. And Beatty was pretty bad to the bone, and he often fought the Confederate bushwhackers in that neck of the woods, and we think some of his men may have brutalized the sister and the mother and then killed them. And so that's pretty much what happened.
Wow.
In the Civil War, we hear about it, and of course now it's more glamorized than it is. You guys both talk about that personal problems. Was there a lot of rape of the women? I know they came through and they burned their barns and took all their food, and this was just the regular armies came through because they had to eat. So basically they'd come through, and there's a story right down where Deb and I was recently where the Union troops come through and they marched through a creek till they just basically stamped the creek dry for a while. And so but they burned barns, and they had to they tear down barns to build their own fires
Or fences.
and
I mean, they tore down the fences to build, and then the animals just went wherever
was
they
there a
wanted to
lot
go.
of rape that went on along this? Is something we
Well,
just
I
haven't
think it's
heard
just
of.
one of those brutal things that's included in
War.
when people are doing crazy things. They'll do crazier things, and sometimes it was a way to insult the family.
There's another possibility here too. Obviously every county in every state has a certain number of criminals or thugs. I'm sure Jim can speak to this too. There are
450 here, right?
and they don't have necessarily any loyalty to either side, but they see an opportunity there to exploit somebody who's innocent and defenseless, a civilian, if you will. And so would it not be ironic if we found out at some point that maybe it wasn't even a pro-Union group, but just a group of thugs? And So
just to go through for money.
yeah, money or whatever. And so
Was some of these bushwhacker groups, did they get wealth out of all this?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And I will say this about Gatewood. Toward the end of the war, he became a little bit more indiscriminate about the kinds of targets. He was making war on all these pro-Union sympathizers. But by the same token, some of his men were not beyond going into pro-Confederate areas. And, you got to think by this stage of the war, late 1864, early 1865, Confederate money is probably worthless. So what's going to help them in the post-war period get by? And that's going to have to be hard currency.
Yeah. Good morning. You're on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning. I may be getting ahead of y'all, but I was going to ask, isn't the massacre at Madden's Branch credited to Gatewood and his band?
Yeah, that's we're going to get to that. Exactly right. Yeah, there are 16, 17 people in Polk County that died that we know directly from Gatewood.
Right.
Yeah, and
I wanted to mention, y'all talked about a Kirkland in Tellico area.
Uh-huh.
I fish Kirkland Creek in the upper Tellico area. It's known as a native brook trout stream. It's not very big. It's almost a ditch where I was at, but it has native brook trout, and therefore a lot of trout fishermen like to go there and catch native brook trout. But I don't know if there's any relation, but
the Kirklands. There was a lot of Kirklands that lived in that area.
I think there's some still here.
There were 6 or 7. He was 6 or
They're not
7 generations
though.
Down when you got to the Kirkland who was the bushwhacker. So yeah, I'd say good chance that creek's named after the family, or maybe where the Kirkland farms were.
Yeah, I don't think Polk County has any Gatewood branches. I'm quite sure of that.
Yeah, he never lived there. He just visited for a short period of time, but like I say, there are 16, 17 deaths. There are 6 guys that come out of Georgia. He left on the side of the highway. He killed a shoemaker in downtown Benton just because he ran. He was a Confederate, I understand.
Right. I wanted to mention one thing also. In the course of my research, I did find that at one time a branch of the Gatewood family settled in Polk County. I actually found the gravesite of John Gatewood's grandmother, who was Amy Gatewood, and she's buried at the Cumberland Shed Presbyterian Church Cemetery, which is kind of down there near Old Stone Fort. And the death date on her marker, if I'm not mistaken, is 1855. And later I did a little bit more research and found that one of Gatewood's uncles, Barry Gatewood, actually settled down there in that neck of the woods too, in that part of the county. So there were some Gatewoods there temporarily, but after the war, the gentleman's absolutely right. I think all the Gatewoods pretty much moved to Texas.
Which is what happened to a lot of Confederate folks.
Right.
Doug, the Madden Branch, the signs are still there, and isn't there a monument or something there? Or
I'm not aware of any monument.
There's something up in that area. Maybe at Chilhowie, but
it's at the Confederate camp.
If you come east from the Whitewater Center, it's on your right there, what they call Boyd's Gap. And that's where Madden Branch runs through that area, and they it's a memorial forest is what I think it says on the sign. So if you haven't seen that, I don't know how well if the marker's still there or not. Who knows? I mean, there are historical markers that get stolen. Yeah.
I know when I give ride to the kayakers back upstream, I always enjoy telling them about the massacre at Madden's Branch, and they're pretty ready to get out of the car by the time.
Nothing like a big guy in overalls picking you up wanting to talk about mass murders.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Doug. Thanks. That's funny. I think Polk County was just isolated enough that people like this could hide out.
Yeah.
And just populated enough that people could be picked on and there'd be a story. I know that there's several stories about people men that were just walking up and down the streets in Polk County that were hung and all kinds of stuff because maybe they had left the Confederate forces.
That was the 1940s too, wasn't it? The Good Government League. That's a whole totally different story. They had another battle there.
That's a different story.
Yeah. So, but now, how did Gatewood get 50 people to ride with him? I mean, is this just...
I think that he probably had the makings of a leader before he ever left Champ Ferguson's group. and I do believe that there were some relatives and friends who rode with Gatewood. I know for a fact that one of his brothers, Henry, rode with him. I just think that after serving with Champ Ferguson for a year or so, there were some men who obviously saw something in Gatewood that they liked, and when Champ was wounded, and this was early in '64, and he had to convalesce for several months, his unit kind of broke up into smaller groups, and one of those smaller groups was led by Gatewood. So,
was you able to find who some of those people were that rode with him?
You know, just about a dozen names come to mind. That was one of the toughest things, was trying to determine who.
Because this wasn't an organized group, or
right.
Wasn't.
They didn't keep a muster roll,
right?
You know,
and
so.
They weren't getting paid by the Confederate Army,
right,
anymore.
Right,
so
right.
So that's interesting. So I read once that some of them were as young as 12 years old. Was that true?
That's absolutely true. And I've also heard that there was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian that rode with them too. There's a lot of legend, a lot of hearsay, but yeah, they were certainly. Well, Gatewood himself, we're not even sure when he was born. We think some sources say 1845, others say 1847. You do the math on that. If he were born in 1847, he would be 18 years old at the end of the war in 1865. So he was in his late teens, so it stands to reason that the guys who rode with him were probably comparable to him in age, if not younger.
Now, he was a big guy, too, wasn't he?
He was big for his time. Ron, I have read somewhere where the average Confederate soldier was maybe 5'7" and weighed 140 pounds. And so Gatewood was 6 foot tall and somewhere between 180 and 200 pounds. And so he was a big man by the standards of that time. He wouldn't be a big man today because that's probably the national average now for a lot of guys. But
and he had what was his nickname?
The Red-Headed Beast. And, of course, there are other nicknames that I can't say on the air that probably other people attributed to him.
Yeah. Jim, growing up in this area, have you ever found any other bushwhackers that come through this area that, we had a lot of things happen in the Civil War, but, we had the bridge burned here, and we had a lot of little battles. And, of course, Miss Henniker and Sherman got in a big argument up here when she tried to take over his house.
No, and I had never really heard anything about the supposed mistreatment of the Union leaning families in this area until I read the Hurlburt book. When
J.S.R.
I always call it the National Enquirer of the Civil War.
Yeah, and when you first read that book, it's almost as though you think, oh, this is just way exaggerated. Nothing, it couldn't have been. But then when you start reading about that, and of course Hurlburt's book is written from the northern perspective, but you realize that it really did. It really was bad in both directions.
Yes.
As far as
he called all of us bushwhackers, didn't he?
well, pretty much, yeah.
Go ahead, caller.
Good morning, caller.
How you doing, Ron?
Fine, Brad. How are you?
Good.
What's going on?
We lost our game last night.
Oh, no, we did.
Yeah,
So what was the score?
6-0.
So who did we lose to?
The Pirates.
Oh, the Pirates. Okay.
The Boston Red Sox were supposed to play yesterday and got postponed.
Yeah, there's a few other things happening in the city, yeah. Well, they'll play today.
Huh?
They'll play today.
Yeah, they do.
The Vols has something going on today, don't they, Brett?
The Vols orange and white game is today.
At 2 o'clock.
At 2 o'clock, that's right. And I think if you're an Auburn fan, which, the only Auburn fan I know is in Auburn today, the Judge Van Deeken, he left yesterday to go down there. They're cutting down the trees that the guy poisoned.
Toomer's Corner.
Yeah, they're going to have to cut those trees down, so Van had to go to that ceremony. And
He'll probably come back with a limb.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He will have it.
He'll have a gavel.
So I think whatever color their game is today is also. All right, Brett. Well, thanks for calling.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye. I hate when the Braves lose.
I want to ask Larry. I'm intrigued.
Hold a second.
I'll stay intrigued.
Okay.
I'll write a note so I won't forget.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yeah, I was wondering if that man ever heard of the massacre on Shelton Laurel, North Carolina.
I have to admit that I haven't.
Oh, tell us about it.
Well, it's back in the Civil War over in Marshall. They had a salt house, and they went in there. It's 13 or 14 people, and stole some salt. So they're going to make an example. So they went up on Shelton Laurel and got 13, 14 people and killed them. Make example. One of them was a 12-year-old boy.
Mm.
I used to live up there, and all my people still do. But I'd seen it on TV and never heard a whole lot about it.
Well, there you need to start writing a book.
Well, it's already on TV.
Oh, well.
Okay.
Beat you to it.
No sense in writing a book then.
Well, I think that's just an example of what you wouldn't think very much about salt, but that was a very valuable thing at that time. Very valuable, probably more valuable than any kind of money you could get your hands on. And so sometimes just greed will drive people to do really crazy things. We're so glad you shared that story with us.
Okay, that little boy's buried right below my uncle's house.
Well, I'm glad somebody marked
Now,
his grave.
Did they get the right people, or did they just go find?
No, that was it. They killed the wrong people.
Yeah. Well, see, that happened a little bit here when we burned the bridges. You know, we didn't really know who burnt the Charleston Bridge up here, but the Confederate arrested a lot of people, and I think they got most of them, but probably got more than they needed, but probably more plotters than anything else. But that's interesting. Did they get anybody right out of the 13 or 14, or was they all wrong?
No, they was all wrong. Thing of it is, all my life I've went up there, and then I lived there for a while, and I passed that sign on the road going up into there, and I never stopped and read that sign till I saw it on TV. And my mother, she's buried up there, and then I stopped and read that sign.
Yep, there you go.
All right, thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Hey, thank you for sharing the story.
Interesting.
I wanted to ask about the 30th Alabama. What led you to write the book about them?
Well, I had 6 ancestors in Company G, all Stevens men, and they suffered heavily at Vicksburg, Champion Hill, places like that out in Mississippi. So that started out as a labor of love. I was just going to do a little genealogy thing on them, and then it kind of morphed into a full-scale regimental history. So
did the 30th ever come this way that you are aware of?
Yes, ma'am. Well, as a matter of fact, Debbie, the 30th, let's see, they were formed in the spring of 62, and in the fall of 62, they were stationed at Cumberland Gap.
Okay.
So they did come through Tennessee. In fact, they took the railroad, I want to say, down around Chattanooga, so they must have come through this area en route to the Gap.
Well, the 33rd Alabama was involved in a train wreck down close to what we call the Bendabout Farm now. And then the 41st Alabama, and I know those could be from way different parts of Alabama, but just kind of connecting things together here, were stationed up in Charleston. As a matter of fact, I think they were in Cleveland, and they became ill, or they were at Silverdale and became very ill, and they were taken by train to Charleston and set out, and supposedly 15 people are buried up there. I think I know where. They're in unmarked graves. But anyway, so we have a connection here. An unfortunate connection in Bradley County is that the railroad did come through here. And, of course, Abraham Lincoln said to have and hold the railroad just east of Cleveland was more important than taking the railroad at Richmond.
Or just taking Richmond.
Taking Richmond, because all the supplies went through here, and there was only one bridge over that river. And so what we had, too, is that they would bring people out of Perryville and places like that had been wounded or killed, and they set them out here in Cleveland, which was the first safe Confederate place there in the early years of the war. So we have 280 or so Confederate soldiers buried on a beautiful lawn up here that we have no idea who they are.
The bridge burning, the great train robbery where all that was sort of all the same time. They're going to catch those bridges down there, burn them up through Tennessee. The Union troops were going to come down and support, now that we've got them. But they changed their mind, says that's not as important. So the Union troops went some other way, and that's how come most of them got caught or didn't get through with it. And like I say, walkie-talkie or cell phone made it. Jim, you had family from here in Bradley County that was involved in the war too. What involvement did they have?
Well, actually, they were from McMinn County at that time.
That's close enough.
None of us were down here yet. But
well, you know, a lot of folks, like the mamas down in here, when they got ready to send their 19-year-old off to war, they'd go find the uncle. And so we had a lot of boys taken to McMinn County and Ray County and Polk County that were taken to be with their family members.
This had only, when the Civil War broke out, this
Confederacy.
had only been a county for 22 years. You know, because this was the
Indian
Cherokee
rule.
Nation until 1938. Literally, at the Hiawassee River, McMinn County was Tennessee, and then this was the Cherokee Nation. It was its own nation, not just.
So we were a baby.
Yeah. So you not getting here before then, not surprising. There were some people who got here early and got good land. Who were surveyors, and they sort of got some really good land.
Picked out the choice.
Yeah, but
places.
what did they serve?
Well, my Hodson ancestors, my great-great-grandfather lived in McMinn County, and he would have been in his 50s, I guess, when the war started. And he was from England. He'd come to America in about 1830 and had first settled in Virginia, Wythe County, Virginia, married there, then made his way down to McMinn County. He had children by this wife, and then she passed away, and he remarried a lady from McMinn County, and then they had children, and that was my great-grandfather was one of their children. But from my great-grandfather's half-brothers, two of them, William and Henry, one served with the Confederacy, one served with the Union. And after the war, Henry was captured at the surrender of Vicksburg, was paroled. He had only enlisted for 90 days when the thing was formed, but
And about 25 days of that was really tough in
there's
Vicksburg.
a lot of indications that the Confederate leadership did not fully trust the Confederate troops from East Tennessee because of all the divided loyalties. They didn't know if they would stand and fight, or so these guys, a lot of them joined up thinking they're going to be serving here in East Tennessee. Next thing you know, they're on a train headed for Mississippi, or they're riding or walking headed to Mississippi, and they got sent to out of this area where they wouldn't be able to sneak back home so quickly. When he was paroled and eventually sent back home, from what I read, the Union kept changing the exchange point, and when you were paroled, you were sent back home and told, stay home until we tell you that you can go back and join your unit. Well, they were supposed to go to Atlanta to go back and officially be exchanged, and a lot of them just didn't go.
No.
They just stayed home. And I think he was among that number. We don't have any record of that, but he never went back to the Army. And then after the war, moved up to northeast Tennessee. And then his brother, who had fought for the Union after the war, he went to Texas, like a lot of the former Confederates.
If you are researching anyone from this area and you can't find them, well, go look in Texas because they're likely to be out there.
That's true with criminals, too.
Well, it was just so hard. The church is divided here. Larry, we had people that were plucking people up out of the cemeteries and going and burying them in a more southern or northern cemetery.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Because they didn't want their folks to be in the soil there beside that Yankee family, which is, sounds crazy, but you know how emotional people get over politics. Well, this was politics on steroids.
Yeah, sure.
And Deb said earlier before the show come on, Thanksgiving was probably an interesting time when the family got together, sit across with swords at each other.
I mean, there were times that generation did not speak to each other.
I'm sure.
And I know that my relatives, we were talking about Vicksburg there, my grandpa Stevenson, close to your Stevens name, he went to war with his nephews and his brother-in-laws and his sons, him being upper 50s, almost 60 years old at the time. He gets shot through the jaw. The bullet comes out on the other side. He's deaf in one ear, blind in the other eye. How they managed to get that man back to Murray County, Georgia is just a miracle.
Without killing
they
him.
got him back. Recovery was long, painful, and horrible and amazing. And then I can't get in the Daughters of the Confederacy because he didn't go back and fight. And I'm going, well, I think he should have a good excuse there.
Jim mentioned something earlier that didn't trust the guys from East Tennessee, and if you go back in your history, you'll it was an interesting time when Tennessee voted to succeed. East Tennessee voted not to succeed, and then they voted to succeed from Tennessee.
Yeah, twice. They tried to-
And of course, the rest of Tennessee says, you can't succeed, we're succeeding. So East Tennessee you see a lot of political over the past years, but it's changed now in Tennessee. But, that the eastern part of the state was a little bit more Republican, too. And the middle and central was a lot more Democratic. And, so East Tennessee was, besides Polk County, was pretty much Republican, and Polk County was a very Confederate area. And
Well,
I don't think they know the war's over yet. My family, on my Moore side of the family, I don't think we ever fought in any of the wars because we lived so far up in the mountains, we didn't even know what was going on. And then my mother's side of the family were all Union soldiers from Buck's Pocket.
That's a good point, Ron, that you make, and it's not just East Tennessee, but from my research, I found that there were counties in North Georgia, Northeast Alabama, West Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, Western North Carolina, where you had heavy concentrations of folks who just wanted to be left alone, and they were either pushed into the Union, or they chose to hide out in the mountains and become mossbacks, if you will. But one of the things I just want to throw this out is just as a statistic that I came across was that Western North Carolina and East Tennessee contributed 40,000 men to the Union war effort, and that's more than 3 of the Union states themselves contributed to the effort. Minnesota, Rhode Island, and Delaware were all Union states, but the total number of Unionists in East Tennessee and Western North Carolina outnumbered even the volunteers from those 3 states.
That's amazing,
That's
Larry. I never thought about
Yeah.
that. That's good.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ron.
Hey,
I've been listening to y'all, and you sound like you know a lot of what you're talking about, but I have a question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Red. That makes me nervous when you have a question. Go ahead.
Which side did Bob Cash fight on?
I believe he was a Confederate.
He was a Confederate.
Oh, okay. That's all I wanted to know.
That's good, Red.
He was a quartermaster. He provided moonshine.
Oh, okay. That kind of figures.
Well, not a lot of moonshine because he drank most of it. And then what he didn't drink, he passed on.
Okay.
Thanks, dear. Bye-bye. Red's one of our regular callers, and she always has good questions.
All right.
And this means Bob's going to call in a few minutes and defend himself.
Well, I hope he does. Bob tried to call me last night late, and I found it early this morning. So, Bob, if you're out there, give me a call. You're listening to Whoop FM Old Town Cleveland here on 99.9, and you can go to www.whoopfm.com. We got Larry Stevens and Jim Hodson here. We're talking about bushwhackers, and right after the top of the hour, we're going to get into Gatewood coming into Polk County and killing people up there.
He may still be there.
And we don't know where Gatewood is, do we?
Not really. I mean, there are a lot of different theories about what happened to the man, but the trail kind of runs cold out there in Texas. And so what's interesting is that he had a wife out there, and she had a child by him, and the child was born in the fall of 1874, and by the summer of 1875, her daddy has dropped off the radar screen. So we don't really know. According to the one daughter that we know he fathered for a brief time, she grew up and later told the UDC when she was ready to join the United Daughters of the Confederacy in Texas, she said, well, Daddy died in the summer of 1875 in California. But she didn't supply any details. And so obviously she would have been too young to have known what really happened, so she must have heard it from another source. Either her mother or somebody must have told the family that he was last spotted in California and that he died out there. And, of course, I have done everything short of going to California to try to ascertain what happened to him. But it's a mystery.
If you win the lottery, you're going, right?
Even if I don't win the lottery, if I can just save $1,000, I'm going to go.
We genealogists can stay places very cheaply, can't
Yes.
we?
Yeah,
Well, somebody online here suggested that he changed his name to Gateway and went into the computer business.
Well, that was going to ask you. Now, were people after him? I mean, was the Union Army saying that you're a criminal, or was they just individuals saying you killed my daddy in Polk County, I'm going to get you?
You know, Gatewood had a rare talent for making enemies by the bushel. And, you know, there's an interesting article that appears in, I believe it was the March 16th issue of the Cleveland Banner, March 16th, 1871, in which it states, Gatewood was killed in a gunfight in Waco, Texas. But I think that was an ingenious ploy on the part of people who knew Gatewood and were trying to protect him to just circulate this rumor back east to try to dissuade people from going out there to hunt him down, because you find that a lot of the gunfights in Texas in the late 1860s and early 1870s were really unsettled scores being settled out there.
Larry, where can folks find this book? And what's the title of it?
All right, it's John P. Gatewood, Confederate Bushwhacker. And I'm so glad you asked, Debbie. The book can be gotten on Amazon.com, and I believe it sells for $18 on Amazon.com. Or if you're in the Chattanooga area, you can find it at the Barnes & Noble store there, I believe at Hamilton Place. And it's a little more expensive if you go to Barnes & Noble, but not much more.
Do you have any books with you?
I only have the one copy I brought with me, Ron.
Okay. He's not like me. He don't carry him around in his trunk. Well,
I bought my copy back
up in Polk County. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We were real excited to get it. What about that Alabama book, the 30th Alabama?
The 30th Alabama book. I have actually. Thank you for asking. That's very kind of you. I have a business card, and on my business card, you'll see that I have a web address. And if I might be so bold as to give you the web address. And it's real easy to remember, all lowercase, one word, www.battleflagpress.com. All lowercase, www.battleflagpress.com. You can visit my website and find my email there, and you can order directly from me. I have other books on the website as well. Okay. So thank you.
And what would they be?
Well,
my library's getting fatter, Ron.
There's the 30th Alabama book, which is entitled Bound for Glory. That's the one where I had all the Stevens ancestors. And then I have two more books. One is entitled Redeemed in Blood, A History of the 57th Alabama Infantry. And that was a unit that was filled with reluctant rebels from the Wiregrass region of southeast Alabama. And I became interested in them. They're probably like some of those East Tennessee groups. They were loyal up to a point, but then they had a high desertion rate. So we've got that book. And then the fourth one is about a moonshiner in Cherokee County, Alabama named Beltree Smith, William Beltree Smith. And that book is entitled Blind Tiger. So thanks for asking. I appreciate the plug.
Well, we appreciate you driving an hour and 15 minutes to come talk to us this morning. And he was a little concerned about being on the radio and talking for 2 hours, but I told him it was okay. Ron and Jim could talk for 24 hours nonstop.
Well, we're trying to get Jim to write a book called The Names Have Been Changed to Protect the Guilty. It's been years you've been. How many years you been in law enforcement now, Jim?
I'm in my 40th year now.
Right.
Wow.
And so you started when you was 10, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Has it changed any over the years?
Oh, yeah, it is. And I tell the younger guys, the ones who listen, which aren't many these days,
yes,
that they don't have much appreciation for where we came from. And I started my career at the University of Georgia and worked with the University Police there. And it was in 1974. It was a time when there was a lot of change coming into police work due to the civil unrest of the 60s, the Vietnam War, and those protests, and people were questioning, the role of authority in America and the role of the police. And I tell them I came in at the end of the knuckle-dragging era of law enforcement when people were hired because they were tough and could fight and that kind of thing. And
been there, done that.
And the President's Commission on Criminal Justice Standards and Goals in 1973 issued this statement that within 2 years, every police officer with general law enforcement authority should have a bachelor's degree. You see how far we've come.
Well, we're to associate degrees now.
But it's progress sometimes measured in geological terms. But it was the beginning of a lot of introspection into how we do our job and what we do. And I was very much influenced by that, and I guess that's probably the reason that I've managed to survive all these years and do a lot of the things that I've been
Real
able to
quick,
do.
I remember when Bradley County, you worked 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week for about $280 a month, and you had to buy your own gun. And it didn't matter what kind it was. If you just had one, that's the kind you carried.
Mm-hmm.
There was no everybody carries a Glock 40 or something like that.
I remember bringing you lunch at the jail, and you could smell the jail from all the way across the street.
Oh,
and they would be Bradley County in size has not changed for hundreds of years, so I remember at times when there'd be 3 officers on patrol at a time, and your car didn't work good. You know, your car might break down on the call. I was turning on my blue lights one day. I'm going around APD 40, and cars were passing me.
He's running emergency
couldn't
traffic
get the
at
car
30
to go.
miles an hour.
So, yeah, law enforcement has changed tremendously now. How many officers do you have on the road at any time now?
Between 9 and 12, depending upon the shift and the day. But on patrol between 9 and 12. Of course, we have other folks, detectives and other folks working.
And then your jail population, you told me, is up to 450 now?
We're staying well over 400 all the time now. And our jail, the certified capacity is 408. And that replaced the jail that was built in 1982. We opened this jail in 2004. The jail that was built in 1982 was originally certified for 99 and then recertified for 117. But when we moved into the new jail, we moved 204 or something like that.
Well, we had from the old jail before
Second Street jail.
the 2nd Street jail. I helped move the prisoners from there, and we had I think that was certified for 2 or 3. It wasn't many it was certified for, but we had about 80 in there.
Yeah,
and
probably about 20 is probably what it was certified.
And when we moved it to the courts had ordered us to close the jail. Remember that? And
I agree.
Yeah, it was a
I could smell it.
Federal consent decree.
Yeah.
To build a
All right, guys.
We transferred about 90 people to a jail that held 90 people day one. So you're crowded day one. So we've never caught up.
Okay, we've been to jail and back now. It's time for our station break.
All right.
You guys hang with us. We'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes. We got to pay some bills and let some other folks talk to you here for just a second.
WOOP LP, Cleveland, Tennessee.
When you buy or sell or pawn,
You can't go wrong at U.S. Money Shops.
when money's tight, you'll be
Cause
alright.
relief's in sight at U.S. Money Shops.
Hi, this is Glenn from U.S. Money Shops. Did you know that U.S. Money Shops cashes all checks, even the ones most check cashers reject? Tax refund checks, payroll checks, government checks, insurance checks, and many, many more.
On with us,
We'll earn your trust.
sell to us, without any fuss. Buy from
You
us.
can rely on us.
Oh, one more thing. If you cash a check with U.S. Money Shops, we'll give you 10% off any purchase in our store. At U.S. Money Shops, we have everything you need at a fraction of regular retail prices. So hurry into one of our 9 convenient locations or visit usmoneyshops.com for the one nearest you.
Buy or sell or pawn today. The better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
Tea cookies, thumbprint cookies, chocolate burgers.
All of this and more is available at the Village Bake Shop, open from 6 to 6 Monday through Friday and 6 to 5 on Saturday. The Village Bake Shop's located at the Village Green Town Center and has been satisfying Cleveland's sweet tooth since 1961. Give them a call at 476-5179 or come and see them at the Village Green Town Center.
Brownies, cupcakes, wedding and birthday cakes, muffins, pies, Danish.
Check into cash. Got the cash you need when you need it fast. We're your money machine.
Money machine.
We'll make your wallet sing. Get on up and get down. Check into cash. Ka-ching.
Short on cash? Visit Check Into Cash and get up to $425 cash advance until your next payday, even without a check. It's quick, easy, and confidential.
Money in your pocket so quick and easy. Get the cash you need confidentially.
Got a bank account but no checkbook? Not a problem with Check Into Cash. If you need money now, you can get our new payday loan even without a check. Get the money you need right now at Check Into Cash, your one-stop money shop.
Check into cash is your
Always use Payday Advance responsibly. Visit checkintocash.com for the store nearest you. Wheeler Technologies has moved. Visit them at their new location at 490 Grove Avenue Southwest next to Bradley Rentals. Same great folks, same great service with a better location to serve you. Call Wheeler Technologies for voice, data, and security needs at 664-TECH. That's 664-8324. And remember, depend on Wheeler Technologies for the current time and temperature every day at 476-1111. Tennessee Alarm Contractor C1750.
Did you know that local businesses produce more income, jobs, and taxes that stay in your local community than national chain stores do? For every $100 spent in a locally owned business, $45 stays in the local economy, while only $15 stay locally when you buy at a national chain store. When you buy from Mermaid Mattress, you are shopping local. Plus, when you buy direct from the factory, you get a better mattress at a better price, guaranteed. But only at Mermaid Mattress here in Cleveland. 1/2 mile off 25th Street on Georgetown Road, right here in beautiful Cleveland, Tennessee. Call 472-2486. Locally in Cleveland at Mermaid Mattress. Find out why Frodaddy and Matador both sleep on a locally made mattress at Mermaid. You give them a call at 472-2486.
Mermaid Mattress Factory and Showroom.
Welcome back to Old Town Cleveland here on Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com. You can call us here in the studios at 614-5553. Today we're talking about John P. Gatewood, a Confederate bushwhacker. The author of the book is here, Larry Stevens, and we have Jim Hodges in with us today. Deb always says he's the only guy in our friends that can read, so he's read the book, and I've actually read this one too. Yeah, so it was a good read.
I know
everything.
You read too, Ron.
Yeah, I do. Not fast. It took me about a year. Do you know? Larry, tell us where you can get the book real quick again.
Barnes & Noble at Hamilton Place Mall down in Chattanooga, and also Amazon.com. And it's you have to, if you key in John Gatewood, it probably won't come up, so you have to key in John P. Gatewood. So maybe I should have shortened the title a little bit there.
When I went online and could I find any more research about then I can't find much more than what you did. You done an excellent job,
Thank you.
I typed in John Gatewood and got your book about 40 times, so that's good.
That's good.
Everywhere you looked, your book is for sale, which is great, and it's done very well for you too, hasn't it?
I don't know yet. The book came out back in November. I know that when I speak to a group, I tend to do pretty well and move a few copies here and there. And I get word through the grapevine that the book is in this library or that library. But I really won't know, Ron, until this summer when I get my first royalty check. So, but the whole bit about getting published is not to make money, but to tell the story. It's a great story, and it needed to be told. And I was kind of surprised that years ago somebody didn't jump on this thing and tell this guy's story. So I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity to tell his story and get it published.
Deb and I have discussed several times that we need to do a free seminar, and tell people how to write a book, and the ways of getting them published or self-publishing, and how to use software and some other things, ISBN numbers, all the things that you have to know about writing a book, and just doing a free seminar, because just writing your family history is important. Deb wrote a family history book on my mother's side of the family, and the Dunn family. If you go to Townsend, Tennessee, where the visitor center is, there's a graveyard across the street. Well, that's my family. And you go down to the
folks will come up to me and go, Ron, what, who are you related to and stuff? And he says, you'll have to talk to my wife.
Well, the Eppersons and the Dunns, and then there's Dunn Hollow going around 321 where the movie Christie was filmed. Why they left there and went to Tinga, Georgia, I'll never figure that out. Left all the Smokies, but
one of the funniest things to come about in the last few days is about our documentary. And most of you know, I wrote a little book to go with the DVD to kind of fill in the missing parts and kind of talk about how we made the documentary and some information. But a friend of ours saw us the other night, and she laughed at herself when she said she watched the documentary. And of course, the first 6 minutes is how the Ocoee Dam was built in 1912. Well, just imagine what those pictures
and why it was built.
And why it was built. And she watched the first 5 or 6 minutes thinking, well, why in the world did they go through all this trouble to make this documentary and make it in black and white? Then she realized all the pictures were from 1912. When we changed over to something color, she went, oh, okay. But we thought that was so funny. We got a big laugh out of that.
And want to mention also that the Caney Creek documentary and book is now available in the Copper Hill, the Ducktown Museum there. So you can pick up the museum at 5 Point now has copies of the DVD and the book, along with Confederate Voices, and the new Heritage Center in Charleston will be carrying our DVD.
All of them. Also, I'm going to have as far as I know, I'm going to have the Civil War maps that I've had reproduced. I've had 2 Civil War maps reproduced. The Museum Center at 5 Points is just not set up to house those, but I think Charleston will be, and they have some names of farm sites, home sites, and things like that on it that I think people will be really interested in. One of them's of Chattanooga, and one of them's of Cleveland.
And the next public showing of the Caney Creek Going Home is the name of it. Will be at the Museum Center on May 9th at 6:30. It is normal museum admission fees to get in to see,
which are very reasonable.
Yeah, to see that. Then the next one will be in Polk County on the
Sunday, May 19th.
Thank you.
2:00
at the First Baptist Church.
Yes, you pass through the red light, go past the Sonic, and turn the next road on the right.
Yeah, it's about a 47-minute film. So
goodness,
it like I say, it's a full-length thing, and it is done very, very well, and we're very pleased with it.
Larry, we laughingly say our son is studying film and audio and all that stuff down at Chat State, and he had made a 1-minute commercial for one of his classes, so I was sure that qualified him to help me do a documentary.
It sounds like something that I would be very interested in. I'm going to try to drive up on May the 19th and see your film.
The 19th or Thursday evening, May the 9th, we'll be here in Cleveland, or come up and see us in Polk County.
It's the same place where you spoke, I believe.
Right.
Yes, at the First Baptist Church.
Right.
Yeah.
We had a really hard time finding a venue, and we had a hard time finding a venue here in Bradley County that we thought would be big enough, and it was not big enough, which was a wonderful problem to have.
And want to remind everybody, if you have not seen the new monument in Cleveland, Tennessee, the Colonel Benjamin Cleveland, the city was named after him. He did not live here. He was not from here. It was a honor given to him by the state of Tennessee for his battle at
Kings Mountain.
Kings Mountain. But now he does have relatives who ended up living here, and we interviewed 4 or 5 of his descendants yesterday during that. We went. I'm a member of the SAR and went with them, and I took those people aside and done a little brief interview with each of those. I'm going to give the SAR, that we actually had descendants.
It was actually quite interesting. We had Mr. Lyle that grew up here, Jim Lyle.
FBI agent.
Retired
FBI agent.
From Washington, D.C. that interviewed with us, and he really was a good speaker, and it was fun talking with him. And we interviewed Carolyn Harris that had been in the Wild River movie, and her sister Shirley Maddox, Robert Rush, I believe, from Bristol.
Yeah, from Bristol.
And then Maggie Evans, and I think there was one other
lady. Right?
Yeah.
There was more, but the rain and all the ceremonies sort of
Brenham
got.
was her last
yeah,
night.
we the ceremony, we supposed to had the Cleveland High band play and all this, and it was pouring down rain, so we canceled the bands and brought it inside, and it was crowded, couldn't hear as good as you want to. I do have all the ceremony videoed, though, so we will the SAR may take an opportunity to show that to somebody. But we had dignitaries from the Sons of the American Revolution.
There were people from
all
states, and there was somebody from Harvard there.
Yes, so,
3 big museums up north, because someone introduced them to me, and I talked to them for a couple seconds, and they were all just kind of staring at me, and I said, yes, I really do talk like this.
But so it's down at the First Street Park. If you go down past the Cleveland Police Department, just keep on going like you're going to the railroad track. Look to the right, you'll see it's behind the billiards club.
The Catch.
And the Catch, that park right there, the statue's there on a nice platform done by Josh Coleman from Cleveland, Tennessee. It's unbelievable. The details of it, you can see every button, every wrinkle. It really turned out great. And someone asked me the other day
why research was done.
Yeah, why hadn't we put up a statue to Benjamin Cleveland? What did we do it 100 years ago? And I said, well, no one did it. That's the same with all history, like you've done with John Gatewood. History is not history till we write it down and make it, and I'll make a big spill about the end, as I always do. But it's important that you do these things, and maybe we need to do that seminar, Deb, about writing free books or writing books. And there's nothing free about writing a book.
I said the other day, told someone that writing a book is a lot like having a race car. Is that when you win and you get money, you feel like you've made money, but it's nowhere near what you spend or the time and the effort that you spend. And we've got another project that we're working on right now, a couple of other projects that we're hoping not to lose money on too.
Yeah, we actually have 2 projects working. One, we're still in negotiations with attorneys over some areas there that we have to clear before we can use a particular name in a project. And so we're working on that, and that's always fun. That always runs the cost up, too. But and then Deb's writing a book on the historical homes of Bradley County, and it's not the houses that everybody thinks down Ocoee Street. We're going to include those, but they're little 4-room shacks that are over 150 years old down on the county line that we're going to try to tell those stories too.
Jim, I'm going to need help finding houses in your community.
All right.
Okay.
And hopefully what we will do is we'll have we'll sort of create our own driving map tour of that inside the book, and we'll have GPS locations for you. So after you read the book, you can just drive by and see these houses. Now, they're all private residence. You can't get out and go in or anything. This is not one of those tours where you get to go to every house. You may get to drive by it. And then Jim and them at the Sheriff's Department will get these calls that there are people prowling in their neighborhoods. So.
That would be me.
Calls, yeah.
Larry, excuse me. We're talking about John Gatewood. Larry, once again, thanks for the book. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Pelican Press. Is that the name of the
Pelican? Pelican Publishing out of Gretna, Louisiana. So,
like I say, if you go and type in John P. Gatewood in a search engine, Google, for example, or Bing or whatever you use, this book will come up pretty quick. You'll see this. And then you'll find some articles down there. If you look long enough, you'll find some things out of the Polk County News, which does great history stuff. It just takes you a little while to scan down through those pages. You still have to research. You'll find more stuff about it. And but Polk County, let's talk about Madden's Branch and Boyd's Gap and what happened in Polk County, Larry.
Whoa, I tell you, there's an entire chapter of the book devoted to that. On November the 29th, 1864, Gatewood and his band of 40 to 50 riders rode into Polk County, and as best we can tell, they probably followed the course of the Ocoee River up the old Copper Road to a place called the Halfway House, which I guess is the halfway point in that route.
From Cleveland to Copper Hill, right.
And then they veered off and went up another little road into the Greasy Creek? Greasy Creek?
Mm-hmm.
Greasy Creek area.
Well,
and apparently
the lady's name, Greasy Creek, was named Greasy Belly. There was an Indian up there, and her name was Greasy Belly, and then they named it Greasy Creek.
Well,
I'm a fountain of useless information, Larry.
Well, long story. That's interesting. That's really fascinating. But the long story short here is that he had a list of people that he had determined were pro-union, and they went from house to house, and they literally assassinated these people, and they worked their way all the way up to Benton, Tennessee. And in Benton, they got a little careless. They not only targeted pro-unionists, but they decided they'd rob a few people. And they relieved them of their valuables, jewelry, watches, that sort of thing. Killed a gentleman up there, really, really gruesome murder. He was a shoe shop owner, and he was rumored to be a unionist, Thomas Kinzer. And Kinzer must have known they were coming because he was trying to get a board, pry up a board with a claw hammer in his shop, trying to get underneath the floor when they caught him. And so they shot him as he was trying to climb through the floor to get underneath the shop. And then they worked their way back down another road and came upon these 8 young men who were walking up the road, and these young men were preparing to pitch in with the federal force at Cleveland. And apparently Gatewood and some of his men were wearing blue uniforms by that time, and that's another story. They had killed some federal soldiers down in Lafayette, Georgia, and had taken their uniforms and were wearing their blue coats. And that was a perfect ploy for them because a lot of the Unionists that they assassinated were not expecting any trouble. They thought they were among friends, and these young men thought they were among friends initially, and then they were put up against a wall. Up against an embankment there on the side of the road, and Gatewood went down the line one by one and popped them with his Navy 36, point-blank range, one shot to the forehead. And so those boys were left there along the side of the road, and then they were later buried the next day by area residents in a mass grave, I believe in the McKissick Cemetery, family cemetery. So
McKissick on top of the mountain. It was on the lake. Now lies between Highway 64 and McKissick Cemetery. You have to take a boat over there.
Yeah,
that's interesting. So, who are the guys' names that are on the monument up at the Confederate campsite?
Now I'll
find their names.
The Georgians were killed. What I read is that they that Gatewood done some killing in Conasauga. He come up and got Greasy Creek and Ocoee River and Benton. The 6 Georgians killed were Thomas Bell, Harvey Brewster, James Hughes, James Nelson, Elijah Robinson, Peter Paris, and Wyatt Parton. Now, they're a monument for them down into Georgia. You know where that is down there?
McKaysville, I think.
Is it McKaysville?
Yes, it is McKaysville.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to read to y'all.
Okay.
In February of 1865, Captain Bible, Lieutenant Marion Longley, Lieutenant Fleming, Jack Green, Jasper McConnell, William Crockett, Fate McClellan, Haney, and a Renfro came into Polk County on a scouting mission. These were local Confederate soldiers, and they visited their friends and families before starting back to their command. They were told to go to Bean Mountain, and on the night of February 15th, 1865, while camped on the mountain, they were attacked by a company or group of bushwhackers who slipped in and fired upon them. Haney was killed and Crockett was wounded. Renfro was taken prisoner. Someone inscribed a stone, and in this picture, someone has chalked it so you can see the names on it. And it was placed at the site many years ago by an unknown person. And McConnell was taken prisoner, but Marion Longley, later Judge Longley of LaGrange, Georgia, makes no mention in his writings about anyone other than Renfro being captured. According to Longley, Bill Crockett was shot 4 times, but he still managed to crawl to Old Copper Road. Wow. That was just brutal. And it is approximately, the rock is approximately 1/2 mile south of the entrance to the Chilhowie campground.
I found some things here. The down around the Conasauga area, there was a Horace Hill. They come in and they killed him. And they went to Mrs. Pettit's house, and they found 3 refugees there. And that was A.C. Parks and Baker Armstrong and Thomas Kinzer. And they killed them there. And then they found this other guy that was just had on a belt buckle. His
Said
name was
U.S. belt buckle.
and it was Alvin Jones, and they killed him.
Yes.
And so,
from what I remember about Jones, he was just a 15-year-old kid and piloting the wagon, and it's really, really sad how he died. How they shot. Well, Gatewood, I believe, shot him in the abdominal area, and then the boy got off the wagon and kind of stood at attention, and Gatewood said to him, "You can go over there and lay your head against that rock and die just as easily there, boy." And so the boy did. He walked over there and laid down and put his hands over his chest like he was already laying in the casket, and died right there on the spot. Very sad.
Did Gatewood use his sword a lot, too? He rode on the big horse. Did you ever?
You know, I think the sword, he may have even discarded the sword early in the war. I know that they tried to outfit the men with as many sabers as they could when they were in the regular cavalry. But really, sabers were not practical for bushwhackers to carry. They made too much noise. They clanged around when you were riding. So he more than likely just had his Navy Colt revolvers and a carbine, and some of the men carried 12-gauge shotguns. And so they traveled pretty light.
Yeah, the later in the war, the carbines were things that the Union troops started. I'm sure they stole as many of those could. They're what all the
Sharps,
54
caliber Sharps.
Yeah, definitely changed the war, particularly if you're coming through Murfreesboro area, Stone River, and when they started using that, and
repeating rifle.
War Trace there. Definitely the repeating rifle there definitely made a difference to the Confederates there. And
the Talking Tree scared you quite a bit there too.
Yeah, the Talking Tree and the War Trace Cemetery. I was looking around this big tree, and the fence has grown into the tree, and as I looked around it, Deb was standing 2 or 3 feet over there, and there's this little box, and she pushed the button, and it started talking and giving a narrative. And of course, about the time I looked in the graveyard around the tree, someone spoke to me, and I was almost convinced it was time to go. Now, Gatewood, at this time, were they wearing Confederate outfits, or were they piecemealed? Of course, now, not all Confederate soldiers wore uniforms in the first place.
Right.
Most of the Confederate soldiers were just a militia, and whatever you had on, and you got paid more if you had your own gun, your own horse, and everything else. So, but the Confederacy wasn't necessarily a true army as such. It was truly a militia. Is that true, Jim? Or
yeah, to some extent. And a lot of units would form and drill, and they might not get uniforms until they're actually put into service with a bigger army. They might finally get some uniforms. Some of them probably never did. Some of them probably were always wearing whatever homespun fabric they came with. And of course, on the Confederate side, men would wear their clothes until they just rotted off of them because there wasn't a resupply, any kind of dependable resupply at times, especially toward the end of the war.
Was in the Confederacy and in the Union, was the generals happened to be the people who had more money?
Well, there's that aristocracy element, and a lot of wealthy people would raise their own military units and would therefore be the dominant commander, at least for some period of time, unless they were proven totally inept, and then the power structure might replace them with somebody else, or they might be folded over into somebody else's unit.
I didn't know if Gatewood's family, who was wealthy at the beginning of the war, I don't know what happened to them as the war went on.
That's a good question, Ron, and I cannot answer that completely. I know that Scott Bledsoe, the attorney there in Jamestown, was the guy that formed the company that Gatewood and his brothers joined. And I think Bledsoe probably outfitted the men as best he could. And then as Jim was saying, as the war went on, people wore what they had until it just became ragged. Mm-hmm. And then you got what you could off either a dead body or so it's probably Gatewood and his boys were a very hodgepodge-looking bunch. And like I say, there is some evidence that they would don blue uniform, the blue coats from time to time, just to fool area residents into believing that they were friendly, and then they would surprise them, rip off the blue coats. And
today, thanks to your book and the history, that Gatewood is a well-known bushwhacker now. During the Civil War in 64, 65, we didn't have CNN News and have instant news, and we didn't have cell phones and walkie-talkies, and basically the newspaper from the area would be that. So did people in Polk County did they have any idea who this guy was coming up through there? Did they know that this was some famous bushwhacker, or just some guy come in that was just really mean?
I think he caught them off guard. I really do. I think there may have been a handful of people in the area who were familiar with Gatewood, but for the most part, so much of his operation took place in northwest Georgia and even into Cherokee County, Alabama. So that's where he really made a name for himself, down in Fannin County, Gilmer County, Catoosa, on over to Whitfield and Floyd and Chattooga. They're in that northwestern corner of Georgia. So I think he probably caught a lot of those folks in Polk County off guard.
Now, why did he pick Georgia? I mean, he was in a Kentucky regiment, I believe. He lived in Middle Tennessee. What brought him to North Georgia? Let's get this call here. Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hello, Ron, Debbie.
Hey, how are you?
Tired.
Well, Miss Ella, you're awful late this morning.
I know it. I slept in. I'm tired. I did a lot of dancing last night.
So you go to Pokey's and get drunk last night?
No, I didn't get drunk, but I got tired.
Oh, you got tired. Okay. You didn't drink anything last night?
I drank one beer.
Oh, that's what they all say.
It helped my leg. Remember, I had trouble with my leg, and my leg ain't hurt this morning.
Oh, so what helped your leg, the dancing or the beer?
The dancing.
Oh, the dancing, okay. So who did you go see?
Fro Daddy.
Oh, Fro Daddy. All right, and he's going to be up at the B&B Marina tonight with the Convertibles at 8 o'clock up at B&B Marina. So you going to make it that far?
No, I ain't got no way to get way up there.
So was it a big crowd at Pokey's last night?
Yeah, there was. I had a lot of good dancing partners.
Well, you got to be careful talking about drinking here. I got a police officer in here with us this morning.
I ain't scared.
Oh, you ain't scared. Well, good hearing from you. I was beginning to worry about you. You hadn't called us this morning.
Well, I was just sleeping in.
All right. Well, go back and take another nap in.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That's the grandmother of Whoop there. She calls every show, I believe. So
that's cool. That's neat.
I'm about to miss her there. She had been here, you know, and her escapades at Pokey's and other establishments, and so she's a big fan of the Convertibles and Fro Daddy, who's one of our DJs here, and he has a band called the Convertibles, and it's the what they call themselves, the party band. So so good. So we were talking about Gatewood just being, but how did he get to? Why did he pick North Georgia to be the place?
Well, I think two things. I think at the beginning of '64, they were, as you said, they were really up in Middle Tennessee. And then when Champ Ferguson was severely wounded and kind of put out of commission for several months, his band kind of broke apart, and Gatewood became an independent commander. And you have to also look at, not only does Gatewood now have the freedom to choose where he wants to go next, but by the spring of '64, the fighting has shifted into Dalton between the major armies, the Army of the Cumberland and the Army of Tennessee, Sherman against Joe Johnston, and then the war kind of moves down that railway, that Western and Atlantic, all the way to Atlanta by the summer of '64. So if you look at the focus of the war effort, it's primarily in Georgia. So Gatewood liked to operate behind the lines, and so he felt that the real war was probably going on down there.
So he basically
kind of followed the fighting,
getting the spoils, maybe.
Yes. Okay.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hey, Ron.
Hey.
Bob Cash.
Hey, Bob Cash. How are you?
Hey, I'm enjoying your program this morning. It's very interesting. Very interesting.
Well, thank you. What can I do for you today?
What, if you will, Ron, tell Doug Guerin to call me. I've lost his telephone number, Ron.
I'll send him a text here in a few minutes, and I'll have him call you.
You're a good man, Ron and Debbie and all you guys. Listen, what about the red-headed stepchild? I haven't heard from her lately.
Do what?
The redhead. I hadn't heard from her.
Well, she called about you a little earlier.
Oh, she did?
We were talking about the Civil War, and she wanted to know what you did during the Civil War.
I fought for Lee at Appomattox.
Well, I told her that you was the quartermaster and furnished the moonshine what you didn't drink.
Oh, see, yes. Ha, ha.
Larry, Bob's.
Hey, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to tell Larry here, he's from down in Georgia. I said, Bob here is the only person who's ever jumped out of an airplane 3 times and hadn't hit the ground yet.
Absolutely.
Wow.
He hit a tree and he hit a building. I don't know what the 3rd time he hit.
Yeah, I hung up the tree, and I was the first one, I think, to ride in Ralph Buckner's ambulance. He called it the Angel of Mercy.
Now, this is a book in itself.
Yeah, well,
was he not wearing a parachute?
Well, yeah, he's wearing a parachute, but now his jump master only had 1 leg because he'd lost his leg jumping out of an airplane. And I'm going, right there's a story saying if your jump master has lost his leg,
that's not a good
go
sign.
somewhere else.
That's right.
All right, Bob.
Hey, listen, by the way, as a point of interest, the folks might want to know, I just passed down here on corner of Keith and where the old Starview Drive-In Theater used to be.
Yes.
And it looks like the city is setting up a roadblock, Ron.
Uh-oh. All right. So
there's my cold beer.
Oh, I know what they've got some kind of bicycle ride today is what's going on. Yeah, there's some kind of charity bike ride.
Oh, is that a fact?
Yeah. So you're all right. You can turn around. They're not looking for drunk drivers.
All right. Oh, thank you, guys, and I'm going to be listening to you. See you later.
Thank you, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Bob is one of our favorite guys to call in, Bob Cash. You know, the character Check Into Cash called Bob Cash is named after him. That's Bob Cash. So that's exactly who he is. All right. Yeah, the spoils and basically the regular army come through and beat everybody up, and they come along and say, "Oh well, we'll clean up the rest of it and take the monies." And do you think Gatewood was a thief? I mean, at this point in time,
I think by the end of the war he had become a thief. I think that he was a loyal Confederate for most of the war and really concentrated on fighting Union cavalry and also doing damage to the railroad. Blowing up rail trestles by putting gunpowder under the trestles, sniping at bridge sentries, attacking companies when he could. But toward the end of the war, as things fell apart for the Confederacy, he became a lot more, mercenary.
Mercenary. Good morning, you're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hey, this is Pappy Lee.
Hey, Pappy.
Listen, I was wondering, do you have any information on the hanging of the Orr brothers up there
in Polk County?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
They're mentioned briefly in the book. The Orr brothers are mentioned briefly in Polk County. I don't have a lot of information on them, but there is that incident that's mentioned in the book.
Pappy, what do you know about it?
Well, that was my grandmother's uncles.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, and according to her, they came home just to help put in the crop. They left the Confederate Army and went home to help put in a crop. And according to her, the Confederates caught up with them there and hung them there. But I was wondering if Gateway might have been, involved in that.
I don't think Gatewood was involved directly in that crime, but we're certainly familiar with the Orr brothers, and that's interesting that you make the point that the brothers were hung. Is that right?
Yeah, they were hung behind the original old jail. They have a kind of a stone monument put up there,
Wow.
To mark the spot.
Now that is interesting. I did not know that.
Do you know what year that was, Pappy?
No, I do not. Grandmother never told me what the year was, but she married a local bushwhacker up there. Her first marriage.
What was his name?
Well, he's got descendants still there, but his name was John Hood.
Okay.
And he came by on a big white horse, and she was a teenage girl, and she was so taken with him, she swung up behind him on the horse, and they went and got married. And she had one child, I think, by him, and then he got caught up with, and he was sent to the penitentiary or hung or something. And I don't know what happened to him later, but the boy died, their offspring, and she remarried John Clark from down around the Old Fort area.
Now, there's a lot of hoods still in the that area down there. Bob Evans called in. I know that there's some relations from the hoods through that way.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's a lot of hoods. That I think my mom's family married into the hoods up there also.
Yeah, but I was just wondering if Gatewood or Gateway, whichever one, Gatewood, I guess.
Yes, Gatewood.
Yeah, I was just wondering if those three were some that he had strung up there.
As Larry said, he don't know, but there's something I'm going to look into it a little bit. Do you know anything, Jim?
Didn't the Orrs have their own little group that was?
That's the story, yeah.
And there was another group, Coot Ray, or that was another one, and they didn't get along, and that Ray was probably, his group was probably the ones that killed him. Now I don't know about him being hanged.
Yeah, they according to Grandma, they were hung there in Benton. That's. I certainly wish I had questioned her more, but I was a kid and didn't.
Don't we wish we all had listened to our grandparents more?
Yeah, and but I know that the Orrs were slaveholders. That's for sure. They were. I've got Morgan Orr's old will, where he has left his black people to his wife.
How many did he have, Pappy? Do you know?
Well, I really don't know, but he had maybe half a dozen, I think.
Okay, that was a lot of slave ownership here in this area. If you had 12 slaves, you probably had a pretty good sized farm. I think the biggest that I've read was about 27 here in Bradley County. A lot of people had one or two that would be house servants type things, cooked and cleaned, but. The 12 to 20 was a big amount here in this area. Now, Middle Tennessee and the big plantations, that got to be hundreds, but not in this area.
Yeah. Well, the Lee family, they lived at down Red Clay, Red Hill Road, through that area, and they didn't have any slaves, but they had a lot of children. So,
well, that's how you did it there. If you couldn't afford a slave, you had children.
Yeah,
a slave was expensive, and during the Civil War, I thought the strange thing was that all the Irish came in into the North, and the northern people started hiring the Irish for 10 cents a day and selling their $2,000 slaves to the people in the South. Then it says you can't do that. So I thought that was interesting. So a little hypocrisy there in the northern the war of the aggression.
The war of northern aggression. That's right.
Not being slave owners, I think most all the Lees went with the Feds. They joined with the Hoopers at the same time as the Hoopers crossed the river and went down there and joined with they were acquainted with the Hoopers and I think they joined with the Hoopers.
Right
there.
Sound like part of the area where my family, the Eppersons, would have went in also.
Yeah, but that's the only ties through my grandmother that I think that we have. I know we don't have any Southern ties with the Confederacy on my dad's side, the Lee side. Maybe one or two renegades cousins, but the direct family that he came from, my great grandfather was married to when the brothers ran for governor against each other, War of the Roses.
The War of the Roses, yeah.
Yeah, well, he was married at the time to their aunt, and when they campaigned through East Tennessee, they stayed at his house down there.
Well, that was interesting. Both of one of them ended up being a senator, one of the governor. It's pretty. All right, thanks, Pappy. I'm gonna look into that Orr family a little bit more.
Okay, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, Pappy always has great information there. Things going on. Madden Branch, and tell us what you know about Madden Branch. It's part of that Polk County thing, and or if we don't know, one of our callers can call us and help us figure out exactly why it's called Madden Branch. I hope. Good morning, you're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yes, my name is Roy Williams, and I'd like to thank Mr. Stevens for his book. I just finished reading it.
Well, great.
Well, thank you, Mr. Williams. I appreciate that.
And I do have a question, if I can.
Go right ahead.
Absolutely.
Well, the question is that the secession of Tennessee overwhelmingly at first voted to stay with the Union.
Right.
And in the aggression, they said you don't have to succeed, but if we are attacked or we have an aggression, will you fight? My question is, does he think Gatewood, if the aggression of the Union had to come in, that he had to stayed with the Union, without his mother and his sister happenstance? Now that's a different story, but that's when I wondered if that part of the country would have stayed with the Union if they hadn't, the Union troops hadn't came in.
You know, to answer your question, Mr. Williams, and it's an excellent question. I think that so many Southern boys pitched in with the Confederacy when it became the War of Northern Aggression, when you had these federal forces coming down out of Kentucky and coming into the home state of Tennessee. That pushed a lot of people into the ranks of the Gray. They, as you pointed out early on, nobody wanted to really go off and volunteer and fight in the beginning, but as it became a war of Northern aggression, you had more and more that decided to pitch in with the Gray because they were defending their homeland. I'm not sure I understood every part of the question, but I hope that answers part of it.
Well, that's just something I'd wondered. I know you all are busy. Thanks for the book.
Sure, you're welcome. Thank
Mr.
you.
Williams, I think that the Gatewood family was a little bit more wealthy, and for some reason the more wealthy of the families tend to go with the Confederacy a little bit more. I don't know if the Gatewoods were slave owners or not, but the slave issue, although I don't think that's the only reason we fought the war was over slavery. I think that's the popular reason. You know, that's the milk for baby reason. You know, something somebody argue with. So,
yeah, to answer that question, Ron, the Gatewoods were big slaveholders all the way up until the mid 1850s, and then they began to sell off their slaves. And if you look at the Gatewood group in Fentress County, where John was born, by 1860, none of the Gatewoods are slave owners. So, but they certainly, he came from a background that was originally Virginia aristocracy, that owned a lot of slaves.
Yeah, well, I want to thank again that Bradley County is where I was born, and I'm familiar with all the places in your book.
Great.
Bring them to the forefront of my memory.
Great.
And I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. I think it's interesting to talk about Bradley County real quick and how things happened that changed the whole totally community. When Bradley County was formed in 1838, from 1838 to the year 1960, Bradley County voted 100% Democratic. They always were Democrats. From 1860 to 2013, Bradley County has voted for Republican president every time except one time. The second time FDR ran, they voted for him. The third and fourth time they did not vote for him. The first time they did not vote for him. But from 1860 forward, this became a Republican community. I just thought that was interesting that it had changed from a Democrat to Republican because of the war. Apparently had a lot of effect on this community and
well, certainly, and then after the war, you have to look at what happened during Reconstruction, and a lot of the former Confederates weren't eligible to hold office, and so you had a lot of former Union soldiers and Union officers moving into this area, buying up property, starting businesses and industry, and they they basically were in control until the end of Reconstruction, and by then, if you consider the pre-war Unionist leanings of a lot of East Tennessee, combined with this Reconstruction influence, additional from the Republicans, and it was pretty solidly locked in by then.
Sure was.
But there's so many complexities as to why a particular individual or family might have supported either the Union or the Confederacy. Not all slave owners were in favor of secession. Not all abolitionists, were in favor of having this awful war. So it's a lot of reason and a lot of personal reasons. With the railroad coming to East Tennessee and tying it to Virginia and the North, there was a new market for crops grown in East Tennessee, and this area, before the war
And
was
the
mainly
shipment of copper.
That too, yeah,
large.
Even though there was very, very little industry in this part of the country, but the fact that they could sell wheat and corn and other cash crops to the north, there was new markets opening there, and a lot of people kind of were afraid of what the war would do to that, and so it's a very, very complex set of issues surrounding the divided loyalties in East Tennessee. And it's just like people today, Debbie said earlier about people being a Republican or a Democrat. When you look at why are you a Republican or a Democrat, a lot of times it's heritage.
Exactly.
And, and a lot of times there's a conscious choice made to support one side or the other, but it varies from person to person as to why you vote or believe a particular way.
That's an excellent point, Jim. I wholeheartedly agree with that, that the Civil War was definitely not something you could just draw a bead on and say, yeah, this group, because they were slave owners, they supported the Confederacy. That's certainly not the case. So it comes down to an individual choice, as it does for all of us.
Yeah, the Civil War is a very interesting history. A lot of times, and we've said this several times, is that we've talked about the battles, and the generals and the battles. But the stories about the people, like in Deb's book, Confederate Voices, it has no battles in it. It talks about people and what happened to the people left here and things of that nature. And, of course, Polk County with Gatewood coming through there is, of course, big thing. Now, Madden's Branch, do we know where Madden's Branch actually is? Does anybody?
I think that if you look at the Greasy Creek area and you have all these little feeder streams that come into Greasy Creek, I think the Madden Branch is one of the branches feeding into Greasy Creek.
Now, is that where the 6 guys that were being the Union soldiers come up and died? So,
yes, in that approximate area.
Yeah, like I say, someone from Polk County may be listening and calling and straighten us all out here, because there's some unbelievable the historians in Polk County are just really tremendous. I mean, they have great records up there, and we've matter of fact, not this next week, but the following weekend, we have Ken Rush from the Ducktown Museum coming down. The museum's been there about 30 years now, I believe I'm correct, and the history of the Copper Hill area and Ducktown and Turtletown and Isabella and all that area up there, pretty amazing. All of us growing up here remembers Ducktown being barren, like you were on the face of the moon or something of that nature, and the stories of how that happened and why it happened, and of course the tie here that over right across from the railroad tracks here is the Roth House. Mr. Roth, who's the one who owned the copper mines and moved down here to Cleveland, and was known as one of the richest men in Tennessee. He moved down and built his house next to the railroad so he could watch his product come and go. So, in the halfway house, you mentioned that earlier, the road around the river, it was so long, it took you 2 days to get here. And they come down, they stop at the halfway house. It was a boarding house, and you could get liquid beverage. And then you got to Cleveland after you stayed over in Frogtown. And in Frogtown, you could get a little drink and maybe some female companionship if you had enough coins. How's that? So that's that. So, but that was an interesting industry there, and so that's coming up in 2 weeks. And next week, folks, we're going to be talking about planting and bees. How bees and how planting, and this time of year everybody's starting to plant. And we've got the agricultural agent, and we have the lady from Appalachian Bees going to be in here, and it's amazing to talk about what all happens, how important the bees are to us, and the history of bees, and to agriculture. Very important. So, Larry, what do you else you want to add about that? We've talked a lot about what other things is there. Did we leave out?
I think we've pretty much covered everything. I mean, I've documented over 60 killings in the book, and they're pretty gruesome. And I could go into more detail about that, but I'll skip that part.
So, and what was the biggest at one time? I mean, was a one.
That's I'd like to think that the Madden Branch massacre and that one day that he rode up into Polk County, I think there were about 19 people on that list that were dispatched with, but it could have been more than that. It's hard to say. It really is hard to say.
Because we're talking about history, just what happened to get into the newspaper, or you read it in somebody's Bible or something that nature.
There are a lot of undocumented killings as well, and this is another point I want to make. We focused a lot on Gatewood, Ron, but there were so many different bushwhacker gangs.
Yeah, there's a Kirkland out of the area up
Kirkland,
there.
yeah. Jim mentioned them, and then if you look, my focus has been primarily North Georgia, but I've counted as many as 8 different bushwhacker gangs in North Georgia, and I'm sure they crossed the line into Tennessee from time to time. But I know right off the top of my head, there were 4 Confederate bushwhacker groups in North Georgia, and about that many for the Union also. And this is another point, is that these bushwhackers were not constantly preying upon the innocent, they were also attacking each other in pitched battles. So there's a bushwhacker named Tom Polk Edmondson who was real prominent in Murray County, and I was speaking to a group in Ellijay, Georgia, not too long ago, and they apparently had a massive battle in Gilmer County that nobody has really written much about. But Edmondson and his Confederate faction rode down and mixed it up with a Colonel Ashworth and the North Georgia Union Scouts, and it was a huge battle. And apparently Edmondson got the better of Ashworth's men, and something like 100 casualties there in the mountains of Gilmer County. So you had a lot of these bushwhacking groups running into each other and slugging it out.
If you think about the Civil War, basically the Kentucky-Tennessee border was sort of a north-south splitting point, was it not? I mean, was that not where you come across into Tennessee, Fort Donelson there on the river up there, huge boat battle, and that's a great park if you never got to go up there and look at that. And then, of course, when the Northern troops won there, they were able to come down through Tennessee, split Tennessee in half, and forced a lot of the Southern soldiers east. It drove them out of Murfreesboro and down through in Corinth or Corinth. Which one do you? It's according to where you live. Which one you call it?
Corinth.
Corinth or Corinth, and there was a railroad right in the middle of it that took troops from going west and east and north. And there was a split point there. That was a big battle, and of course, come through Chattanooga, Chickamauga, back from Chickamauga back to Chattanooga, and then of course on to Georgia to the sea. So like I said, Bradley County never had any huge battles. Polk County never huge battles, but definitely as part of the war. A lot of the people who fought, who burned Atlanta, come down the railroad tracks through Charleston and went on down through Chattanooga. And
we were a big assembly point for the Atlanta campaign.
Sure, and like I say, McClellan camped down here on what's been about farms. I forgot how many thousands of troops. It's 30,000. Blue Springs School property. I forgot which group that was. Sherman visited
a number of northern units. There were probably close to 100,000 troops in that area.
I think the Indiana 9th
there
was the biggest one
19th,
here.
18th.
Yeah, then we had the Michigan. Where we have Michigan Avenue, that come from the Michigan troops who camped along. It's the only place we have a Michigan Avenue Road. It's an avenue road. So that's always been an interesting name. Let's get this call. Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ron.
Hey.
I just want to say, this is Brenda. I just want to say that I really appreciate the show and all the shows that you all have been doing about the Civil War, because to be honest with you, I didn't know that much about the Civil War. And what I have learned through listening to the show and through books and through what I have heard here on this show. And I want y'all to know that I really appreciate it. This has been a real interesting show.
Well, thank you, Brenda.
And I just wanted to let you know that. And right now, the doctor has pulled me off of driving the car, so I don't get to do that much, and I look so forward to this show, and I just want y'all to know how much I appreciate it.
Well, I haven't said this in a while, but Brenda played a floozy in a movie.
I played a dancer, Ron.
Oh, excuse me. It was in a bar. She was in the Nights the Lights Went Out in Georgia. She got to play a part in there.
Interesting.
All right, Brenda, thanks for calling. Hope you get to feeling better.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Hey, guys, that's been our show. Larry, you got any last comments?
I just want to thank Ron. Thank you and Debbie again for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And so
tell us how to get the book, Ian. It's John P. Gatewood.
John P. Gatewood, Confederate Bushwhacker, can be gotten at the Barnes & Noble store in Chattanooga at Hamilton Place Mall. You can also order it online through Amazon.com. And my personal website, I have a few copies left. You can get it on my personal website, www.battleflagpress.com, all lowercase, all one word. So thank you. It was a privilege to be here with y'all today.
Well, great. It's just a great book and great information. Has a lot of local ties to this area. Some of those people were actually from Bradley County that died in that Polk County area up there. So we really
and thanks to Jim, too.
Jim, oh, yeah. I'm going to let him finish that. If you can't remember all those WWs and all that same, just type in John P. Gatewood, and you will find Larry's book. He is the master when it comes to John P. Gatewood. How's that? Jim, you got any closing? Come on.
Just really enjoyed the book, really enjoyed the opportunity to be here on the show.
Well, thank you so much. Deb had to step out early today. She had to go participate in the home show that's going on here. If you go down to the history branch, I believe at the across from the main library, you can buy a pass to go see 4 or 5 historical homes from Bradley County. It's a self-walking tour. You go in and they'll tell you about the houses. The remodeled Hardwick House, just north of the library, just south of the library, has just been remodeled by members of the Hardwick family. They've come back and bought that house again. It is gorgeous from the outside. So that is, people haven't been in that house in many, many years. So that is on the tour. So that was great. As always, I try to end the show by saying history is our responsibility, folks. We'll always know about Pearl Harbor, but we won't know about what happened on your street, what happened with your family. You've got to write it down, take pictures, get those old pictures out from under the bed, out of the shoe boxes, out of the closets, out of that drawer, and let your grandmothers and grandfathers and aunts and uncles, neighbors, at least tell you who's in the pictures. I'm afraid in a few years, now we take all our pictures on our cell phone. There isn't printed pictures. People don't write anything anymore. It's all email. So our history is going to die unless we do something about it. So once again, it's your turn to start saving history. Hey, we'll be back next week. We'll be talking to the bee people and how to plant a crop or two. This has been Old Town Cleveland. We'll see you next week.
Did you know that local businesses produce more income, jobs, and taxes that stay in your local community than national chain stores do? For every $100 spent in a locally owned business, $45 stays in the local economy, while only $15 stay locally when you buy at a national chain store. When you buy from Mermaid Mattress, you are shopping local. Plus, when you buy direct from the factory, you get a better mattress at a better price, guaranteed. But only at Mermaid Mattress here in Cleveland. 1/2 mile off 25th Street on Georgetown Road, right here in beautiful Cleveland, Tennessee. Call 472-2486. Locally in Cleveland at Mermaid Mattress. Find out why Fro Daddy and Matador both sleep on a locally made mattress at Mermaid. You give them a call at 472-2486.
Mermaid